Yes, yes, come closer, sit a bit nearer to the fire. As the darkness falls, the silence of the night will carry whispers of the past to our ears. Today, I'm going to tell you a story. But not just any story. This is the tale of a civilization shaped by the footsteps of gods and heroes, molded by wars and great wisdom. I can almost hear the echoes of the waves crashing against the clear waters of the Aegean. Ancient Greece, is it a fairy tale? Or a legend? No, this narrative is the story of a lived history, an everlasting legacy. Close your eyes. Breathe in the salty sea air of the Aegean as the breeze gently brushes your hair. You're walking through small, cobbled streets. The towering walls of those city-states rival the shadows of heroes. At every corner you might hear a philosophy lesson as you stroll through the streets. You'll catch Socrates' wise discussions and witness the great debates of young Athenians. And there, the grand temples. Columns carved from white marble reaching up to the sky, dedicated to the gods. But today, I'm not just going to tell you about the gods, I'll tell you about how a people ruled by gods came to be. These lands have collected many stories, from Minos to Mycenae, from Homer's epics to the brave Greeks resisting the power of the Persians. A people who lived with honor, sometimes in victory, sometimes in defeat. Yes, who were these people? How did they live? And why did they become so great? We're going to go back to those days now, and I'll tell you about the birth, growth, and eventual fall of this great people. Those events that seem lost in the dusty pages of history, but are actually part of our lives every day, will come alive once more with you. Ancient Greece. Every stone, every statue, every thought of this civilization hides a meaning. Their world is so deep. While we sit here today, I won't just tell you about the lives of kings and queens. Today you'll witness an era where gods intervened directly, heroes fought with bravery, philosophers made sense of the universe, and ordinary people lived grand lives in their small worlds. Are you ready? We'll start our journey slowly. First, feel the geography. Understanding how this civilization became such a great power starts here. The lands shaped by the sea and mountains gave the Greek people their destiny. When you look at the deep blue waters of the Aegean Sea, it's impossible not to understand why ancient Greece established such a great civilization. You scan the horizon with your eyes, spotting an island here, a story there. The breeze seems to carry whispers of history to you, and you realize that these lands, these islands, these shores are all miracles. The geography of ancient Greece profoundly influenced the people's way of life and their way of thinking. Those gently curving coastlines, valleys surrounded by mountains, fertile plains. Each one rises like a solid foundation on which Greek civilization was built. But these lands weren't easy. The Greek territories were separated and divided by mountains. Behind every mountain was another world, another city-state. That's why Greek civilization developed as a collection of independent city-states or polis. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes. Each one was like an independent kingdom with its own laws, lifestyle, and pride. But they shared a common identity: they were Greeks. And these city-states, while fiercely competing with each other, also led the way in spreading their civilization to the world. Isn't it fascinating? These small and independent cities created one of the greatest civilizations in history. One of the most important elements of these city-states was the sea. The waves of the Aegean weren't just a body of water to them, they were the lifeblood. The Aegean Sea acted like a bridge, connecting the islands and the mainland. Every port told a different story, every ship brought news and riches from faraway lands. The Greeks became master captains of the sea. Their wooden ships not only ventured into local trade, but also bravely sailed to distant lands. They established trade networks from Crete to Italy, from Egypt to Anatolia. Spices, olive oil, wine, and ceramics. Every day, a caravan of treasures was transported across the vast waters of the Aegean, And with trade, not just goods but ideas flowed as well. Every new idea helped Greek civilization grow and develop a bit more. Now close your eyes and imagine. A Greek island appears in the distance. You can smell the salty sea breeze. Picture the ships approaching the shore. Greek ships docked at the ports every day, overflowing with exotic goods. On their wooden decks were barrels of olive oil, sacks of spices, and ceramic bowls. You could see traces of the prosperity brought by trade at every corner. And of course, these sailors weren't just traders, they were also great adventurers. The winds of the Aegean carried them to unknown horizons every day. But these lands were blessed not just by trade, but also by the riches provided by nature. The fertile plains of Greece were filled with olive trees. Olives. This sacred tree not only formed the foundation of Greek cuisine, but was also seen as a gift from the gods. The branches of the olive tree became symbols of victory. Its oil was the crown jewel of every meal and every temple. Can you picture a philosopher sitting in the shade of an olive tree, contemplating nature's wonder? Maybe Socrates or Aristotle shaped their thoughts in the shade of olive trees, just like us. Of course, not only olives but also vineyards were another treasure of these lands. In ancient Greece, wine was known as the drink of the gods, and every major celebration, ritual, and victory was crowned with wine. The Greek lands generously offered these two valuable products, olives and grapes. And these products became a source of wealth not just for the Greeks but for the entire Mediterranean world. The Greeks excelled in agriculture. Small terraces built on the mountain slopes were filled with olive and grape vines. Every farmer put great effort into working the land. They understood the language of the soil. They lived in harmony with nature. But let's not forget, these lands weren't just filled with riches and natural beauty. They were also a land of hardships. Times of drought, rugged mountains, limited land. The Greeks learned to cope with these challenges. For them, nature was both a friend and an enemy. And these challenges made them a resilient, strong, intelligent, and creative people. Perhaps this is why Greek civilization was so great. They lived in a world where hardships made them wiser and more determined. And so these lands where trade, seafaring, and nature harmoniously blended hosted one of the greatest civilizations in world history. The boundaries of the city-states were drawn not just by land but also by the world beyond the sea. For them, the sea was not a boundary but a gateway, and every gateway made them a little bigger, a little stronger. Thus, with the prosperity brought by trade, the Greek city-states became centers of power. Crete. The jewel of the Aegean, the heart of the Mediterranean. When I close my eyes, I see an island surrounded by rocks in the middle of the sea, far away. Every corner of this island smells of history. And right in the center, there's a grand structure, the Palace of Knossos. This palace wasn't just an ordinary building. With its complex labyrinthine corridors, colossal columns, and grand courtyards, it was truly mesmerizing. It was the palace of King Minos, the heart of the Minoan civilization. Every wall, every stone in this palace told a different story. Legends say it housed a minotaur, a terrifying creature that's half man, half bull. King Minos kept it in a labyrinth deep within the palace, and the creature demanded young victims every year. The Minoan civilization was famous not just for its legends but also for its wealth and power. Crete's dominance in seafaring allowed them to establish a vast trade network across the Mediterranean. The people of this island understood the language of the sea, sending their ships in every direction. They brought gold from Egypt, copper from Anatolia, and spices from the Levant. But the Cretans weren't just traders, they were also pioneers of art, culture, and peace. The frescoes found in the Palace of Knossos reveal their peaceful nature and love for art. Living so close to the sea, they enjoyed life as an art form, with bull-leaping sports, religious ceremonies, and festivals. Unfortunately, the harsh power of nature brought the end of the Minoan civilization. A massive eruption occurred on the volcanic island of Thera to the north of Crete. The eruption's smoke reached miles away. The entire Aegean was affected by this disaster. Tsunamis wiped out coastlines and civilizations were buried under the volcanic ash. This catastrophe deeply shook the Minoan civilization. No matter how powerful they were, humans are so vulnerable in the face of nature, aren't they? The palace of Knossos fell silent, and Crete's enchanting wealth was buried in the dusty pages of history. But they say every end is a new beginning. With the fall of Crete, a new power began to rise on the other side of the Aegean. Ah, Mycenae. Who hasn't heard of this warrior people? If the Cretans were peaceful traders of the seas, the Mycenaeans were the ruthless warriors of the battlefield. Their city-states were surrounded by massive walls. Under every stone, there was a trace of a battle, a conflict. The Mycenaean civilization drew its strength from swords, armor, and the cold reality of war. One of their capital cities, Mycenae, was famous for its enormous walls and powerful fortresses. Behind those walls ruled powerful kings, warriors, and commanders. Mycenaean warriors, clad in armor and armed with swords, were always ready for battle. For them, war was an art, a way of life. And of course, when you think of Mycenae, you think of the Trojan War, don't you? A war where legends and reality intertwine, transcending time. Troy was located across from Mycenae, on the shores of Anatolia. These two great civilizations were responsible for one of history's most memorable conflicts. According to legends, the war started when Paris, a Trojan prince, abducted Helen, the beautiful wife of King Menelaus of Sparta. But oh dear friends, the truth is never that simple. There was a deeper reason behind the Trojan War trade routes and power struggles. Troy was blocking Mycenaean trade routes, threatening their wealth. That's why King Agamemnon of Mycenae gathered a huge army and marched to the gates of Troy. Greek mythology immortalized this war. This great conflict, lasting 10 years, became a struggle not just between kingdoms but between gods. Each god supported their own hero, and legends were written on the battlefield. Troy's massive walls became stronger with each attack, thwarting Mycenaean efforts. But in the end, intelligence and cunning brought victory. Ah, that famous Trojan horse trick. Mycenaean soldiers hidden inside a wooden horse opened Troy's gates at midnight, and the city fell forever. Troy's shining streets were set on fire, and its great walls were destroyed. But the Trojan War didn't end with just a city-state. At the end of the war, heroes either did not return or found their homes in ruins. Troy was the final victory for Mycenae, for this war was also the harbinger of the collapse of the Mycenaean civilization. Centuries of struggle had worn out this great warrior realm. As nomadic tribes looted Mycenaean cities one by one, the once great walls fell apart. The Mycenaean civilization, like the Minoans, was disappearing into the dusty shelves of history. However, you must remember that every collapse is the herald of a new rise. After the ruins of Troy and Mycenae, a completely new civilization was preparing to be born in the Greek world. Those great city-states, those famous philosophers, those legendary epics, all were built upon the legacy of these ancient civilizations. Ah, my friends, we've witnessed the rise, triumphs, and splendor of great civilizations. Minos' wealth, Mycenae's power, Troy's resilience. They all shone like dreams, only to fade away. As they say, every rise has a fall, and that's the harsh truth of history. No matter how mighty a civilization once was, it's destined to be crushed under its own weight one day. Now, let me tell you how these brilliant civilizations were buried in the depths of darkness, just like the first light of dawn pulling away from the pitch-black night. The palaces of Minos fell silent, and the fortresses of Mycenae crumbled one by one. But my friends, this collapse wasn't like a sudden storm. No, it was a long and painful process. Nature, wars, internal strife, rebellions, each of these contributed to the downfall of these great civilizations. The mighty sea power of Crete was shaken by the eruption of the volcano on Thera. The seas roared, the coasts were destroyed, and a deluge seemed to take place. The once sky-high splendor of Minos was now lost in the waves, and the subsequent events accelerated this collapse. Trade routes closed, people were driven into starvation, and this led to the end of a civilization. Silence reigned in Crete. The enthusiastic sounds of bull leaping, the joy of the palaces, and the cheerful laughter of ships returning from the seas were gone. Everything had faded away into silence. But Crete was not alone. On the other side of the Aegean, Mycenae faced its own great destruction. The magnificent walls, powerful kings, and brave warriors of Mycenae began to weaken first from external threats, then from internal rebellions. The sea peoples launched attacks on the Aegean coasts, plundering cities and destroying fortresses. Ah, the sea peoples. Where they came from, who they were, remains a mystery. But what is clear is that they left devastation in their wake that would prevent any civilization from flourishing again in those lands. The great fortresses of Mycenae, once defended by the famous soldiers who destroyed Troy, could no longer protect their own lands. Internal strife, hunger, resource depletion, all these factors combined to rot the foundations of these once great civilizations. And so, my friends, a dark age began. Ah, the Dark Ages, one of humanity's toughest trials throughout history. The blue waters of the Aegean now carried not hope but fear. Cities turned into ruins, trade ceased, art was silenced, and science was forgotten. A time when writing was lost, and reading and writing almost became legends. Can you imagine? At one point, the Aegean, overflowing with inscriptions, poetry, and stories of those brilliant civilizations, had become silent. People could no longer find peace in their cities or communicate with each other. The loss of written language was not just a cultural loss, it was also a communication breakdown. Kings could no longer govern their people because communication, record-keeping, laws, and decisions were lost. People had to continue their lives through oral traditions. Folk tales, legends, and folk songs were the only records of that era. The greatest tragedy of this chaotic period was social collapse. People who once lived together, traded, and advanced art and science had now become enemies just to survive. As cities fell, villages and towns became isolated. Trade routes were no longer safe, traveling by sea or land was impossible. People fled their homes, seeking refuge in mountains and forests. Agriculture dwindled because fields were either destroyed or abandoned. Hunger, disease, and insecurity spread across the Greek world. But every darkness brings with it a light, doesn't it? Because history, too, flows like a river, sometimes calmly, sometimes violently. This dark period heralded the coming of a new order. These tough times forced people to come together again. The people began to re-establish city-states, like a tree sprouting anew from its roots. Throughout the Dark Ages, the surviving people reshaped their cultures, legends, and beliefs. The Greek city-states that emerged after this period laid the foundations for the great civilization. This reborn people might have been on the brink of the greatest cultural, artistic, and philosophical developments in history. But those dark years, my friends, must not be forgotten. They remind us of how humanity can survive, and that there's hope at the end of every hardship. From the silent palaces of Minos, the empty fortresses of Mycenae, and the ashes of Troy, civilization would rise again. Every fall heralds a new beginning. Ah, I remember those days, my friends. There was once peace in the land of the Aegean. The sea was a path connecting the islands, and trade ships were bustling in the ports. But then shadows fell over the Aegean. Whispers with the wind and footsteps that shook the land began to be heard. This all started with the arrival of the Dorians. The Dorians were a people from the north. Who were these people? Where did they come from? It's not entirely clear, but one thing is certain: they turned the existing order upside down wherever they came from. The Greek lands that once thrived in the glory of the Bronze Age stepped into the Iron Age after the Dorian invasions. Iron replaced bronze, because, my friends, iron was harder and more durable. But this transition was not easy. The kings, aristocrats, artists, and scholars who were synonymous with the Bronze Age did not know what to do in the face of this new era's harshness. When the Dorians arrived, they brought not only their swords and shields, but also a new cultural structure. The old cities and old systems were destroyed. The magnificent cities and palaces of the Mycenaean civilization were shattered. The people had to abandon their cities and take refuge in the mountainous regions. At this point, humanity was essentially stepping into a new era, the Iron Age, an era where war and struggle became tougher, and survival took precedence over everything else. The innovations brought by the Dorians fundamentally changed the social structure and political order in Greek lands. The nobility of the Bronze Age, the ornate armor, and the splendid castles were now gone. People were now trying to survive with the sharpness of iron. And in this tumultuous period, a name began to shine. A name that neither the Dorian invasions nor the brutality of those wars could erase. That name was Homer. Ah, Homer, what a great poet, what a great storyteller he was. He created an era with his words and gave hope back to his people with his epics. Those epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey, are considered among the greatest stories in history. These two great epics were not just stories. They were like ancient teachers that conveyed the memories, heroism, tragedies, and human conditions of the past. They also allowed the people of the Iron Age to rediscover their identities and values. Homer's epics actually told the tales of the last heroes of the Bronze Age. The Iliad narrates the Trojan War, a saga where heroes, kings, and gods were intertwined. Achilles' rage, Hector's honor, Agamemnon's pride, all of them reveal the tragedy of the Greek people who stepped into that great war. But my friends, it was not just a story of war. The Iliad showed how humans struggled with war, honor, pride, and fate. Homer delved into the depths of the human soul in this epic. It was as if he had seen these heroes and events with his own eyes. But who knows, maybe he really did. And of course, the Odyssey. Ah, my friends, that long journey. The challenging 10-year return journey of the Greek hero Odysseus. This epic described the struggle to return home after the war, the challenges faced, and the resilience of the human spirit. Odysseus' intelligence, cunning, and determination served as an example to the Greek people. Because in those times, people were struggling with difficulties just like Odysseus, trying to survive. With these epics, Homer inspired his people and taught them about recovery and rebirth after the war. However, the most important aspect of Homer's epics was that they passed down the history, values, and culture of that era to future generations. The Iliad and the Odyssey did not only recount wars and heroism, they also reflected the Greek people's beliefs in gods, social order, internal structure of kingdoms, and human relationships. Gods, people, kings, and the populace came together in these epics. The interventions of the gods, the mortality of heroes, and the helplessness of humans became the cornerstones of Greek mythology. My friends, the Dorian invasions and the ensuing Iron Age might have been a challenging period for the Greek world, but this period also witnessed the birth of great poets like Homer. Homer shaped not only the past but also the future. These epics guided the people of the Greek world who were searching for their identity, teaching them that they needed to fight. Thus, even though they were going through a dark and difficult age, the Greek people managed to recover with these epics. That's why, my friends, with Homer's words and the stories of heroes, the people stepping into this new era remembered their past and did not lose hope for their future. Although the shadow of the Dorians darkened the land, Homer's epics lit up this darkness. And that light continued to resonate throughout every corner of the Greek world for centuries. I remember, my friends, the rise of the Greek city-states, the famous polis, was one of the greatest changes in history. No longer were there large empires ruled by a single king, but instead small states, each with its own identity, governed by their own people. These city-states were perhaps the purest reflection of the Greek spirit. Each one was crafted like a work of art. On one hand, you had Athens with its streets full of art and wisdom, and on the other, Sparta with its strict discipline and warrior tradition. And what made these city-states so impressive, my friends, was that each had its own unique system of government and social structure. But the birth of these city-states wasn't just about their internal politics. These small states along the Aegean coast soon set their sights beyond their borders. They turned their gaze towards the Mediterranean, seeking rich lands and new opportunities. Thus began the great Greek colonization movement. As a seafaring people, the Greeks sailed across the seas, reaching the fertile lands of Asia Minor, the coasts of Italy, and even the cold waters of the Black Sea. They didn't just trade, they founded new cities and brought their culture to these new lands. The people who lived in these colonies formed independent city-states, just like their homeland, but the connections between them remained strong. In Asia Minor, there were the Ionian cities, in Italy the colonies of Magna Graecia, and the coastal cities of the Black Sea. This expansion spread Greek culture and influence throughout the Mediterranean. Oh, what a time it was, my friends. Wealth grew with the colonies, cultures mingled, and the city-states competed with each other. But one of the greatest innovations of this era was the birth of democracy. In the Greek world, people began to have more of a say in their governance. Each city-state forged its own path, but there were two cities that stood out, representing two entirely different worlds: Athens and Sparta. Athens. Athens. The cradle of art, science, and philosophy. Here people enjoyed the freedom of thought. Democracy wasn't just a system of government, it was a way of life. Citizens spoke in the assembly and decided their own futures. Athens was a city-state that grew under the light of knowledge. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. These thinkers, these philosophers, walked the streets of Athens, engaging in debates with the people. And from this environment came some of the greatest ideas in not just Greek history, but human history. But my friends, on the opposite end, there was a completely different world: Sparta. Sparta was the symbol of warrior culture, discipline, and toughness. Here, it wasn't democracy, but oligarchy that ruled. This city-state, led by two kings, focused all its energy on military power. Children were raised as soldiers from birth, living disciplined lives. In Sparta, it wasn't free thought that was valued, but military discipline. Spartans, undefeated on the battlefield, represented the pinnacle of physical strength and courage. Even women, compared to those in other city-states, were raised to be much stronger and more independent. Sparta was truly a war machine, but this machine left little room for art, science, or philosophy. And so, my friends, these two city-states represented two different paths in the Greek world. On one side, Athens, where wisdom and art flourished, and on the other, Sparta, known for its discipline and warrior spirit. Yet both played crucial roles in the development of Greek civilization. Thanks to them, the Greek world produced not only warriors but also great philosophers, artists, and scientists. Now, my friends, I'm going to take you to another great event. In the Greek world, every 4 years, a grand festival was held in honor of the gods. The strongest and most skilled athletes gathered for this celebration of the gods of Mount Olympus. This festival, my friends, was none other than the first Olympic Games. It's said to have begun in 776 BC. Back then, the competition between city-states wasn't just on the battlefield, but also on the sports field. Athletes from Athens and warriors from Sparta competed to show their devotion to the gods and their strength. But these games weren't just a competition, they were a cultural event that brought the Greek city-states together. People from every corner of the Greek world gathered, competing against each other while sharing a common culture. The Olympic Games, beyond being a festival dedicated to the gods, reinforced the unity and identity of the Greek world. Even city-states that were constantly at odds with each other would lay down their arms during these games, declaring peace to participate. After all, the honor of the gods was above all else. These games, dedicated to the gods of Olympus, were the most important symbol of the Greeks' shared cultural values. Strength, discipline, and aesthetics came together in these games, serving as a major source of prestige in Greek society. And so, my friends, as the Greek world grew rich through its city-states, it expanded across the Mediterranean with its colonies. Democracy was born, philosophers emerged, athletes challenged the gods. The Greek world was like a mosaic. Each city-state added its own color to the picture. The brilliance of Athens, the iron will of Sparta, the wealth of the colonies, and the unifying spirit of the Olympic Games. All of these formed the foundation of Greek civilization. Friends, once upon a time, the mighty Persian Empire of the East set its sights on the West. Their target was the free and independent city-states of Greece. The Persian king Darius was expanding his empire as if he wanted to rule the entire world, adding more and more territory. But Greece. Oh, Greece was not a place that would surrender easily. When Darius set his eyes on Greek lands, the Greek city-states were in fierce competition with each other. Each was fighting to protect its own independence. The Persians saw this division as a weakness and decided to attack Greece. But friends, little did they know that the Greeks had hearts large enough to defeat even an army. The first major Persian attack occurred in 490 BC. As the Persians approached the Greek shores with a massive fleet and countless soldiers, a period of fear began for the Greek people. The Persians were coming not only with their soldiers but also with their discipline, wealth, and seemingly invincible power. This great empire of the East wanted to subjugate the Greek city-states and bring them under its control. Darius loaded his army onto ships and crossed the Aegean Sea to land in the plains of Marathon in Attica. But it was here, friends, that one of history's greatest victories was about to be won. Marathon. A place where just hearing the name sends chills down our spines, where the Greek people shed blood for freedom, and where courage and determination triumphed. When the Persians stepped onto Greek soil with their powerful and numerous armies, the Greek soldiers were vastly outnumbered. Yet, in the hearts of this small Greek army was an endless faith, love of freedom, and patriotism. Oh, the Battle of Marathon. Oh, what a battle it was. Two great worlds, two different civilizations, two opposing forces clashed in the plains of Marathon. On one side were the Persians, with their countless soldiers and enormous army, attacking Greek lands thinking they would crush them. On the other side were only a few thousand Greek soldiers, preparing for battle without knowing they were about to achieve one of the greatest victories in history. The Greek army was commanded by the brave and clever Miltiades. His plan was remarkably clever, more than the Persians had anticipated. Despite the size of the Persian army, the Greeks used their shields to form a wall against the Persians. Here, friends, lay the secret of this battle. Miltiades arranged his troops in such a way that the Persians were encircled before they even realized it. The Greek army had fewer soldiers in the center but strong units on the flanks. When the Persians attacked the Greek center, the soldiers on the flanks swiftly attacked and surrounded the Persian army. This brilliant tactic opened the doors to victory for the Greeks. and the moment came. The Persians faced an unexpected resistance. In this epic battle on the plains of Marathon, Greek soldiers practically overwhelmed the Persian army. The Persians' numerical superiority was not enough to save them. The Greeks broke through the Persian lines and defeated them. That vast Persian army had to retreat in the face of the Greeks. This was not just a victory, it was a triumph of the Greek spirit, freedom, and courage. And here, friends, comes another unforgettable moment in the story. A Greek soldier who returned from the Battle of Marathon ran with all his might to deliver the great news of victory to Athens. His name was Phidippides. He ran the 42 kilometers from Marathon to Athens without stopping, almost exhausting himself. When he reached Athens, he declared the victory with the words "Ninikakemen, victory is ours," and then he collapsed and died from exhaustion. Friends, this great hero's sacrifice is the origin of modern marathon races. This victory was a turning point not just for the Greek people but for all of Western civilization. If the Persians had won at Marathon, the Greek world might have been lost. Thus, these people burning with a love for freedom managed to defeat the Persians and shape their own destiny. The freedom of the Greek city-states was preserved, and the foundations of Western civilization were laid. The Battle of Marathon was not just a military victory but a struggle for the existence of a civilization. Darius could not accept this defeat. It was just the beginning. The Persians had retreated, but the war was far from over. Darius's successor, his son Xerxes, would attack Greek lands again to avenge his father. But that's another story, friends. The epic that began on the plains of Marathon would be etched in history as one of the greatest symbols of the Greek people's struggle for freedom. King Xerxes of Persia. He was a powerful and ambitious king, determined to avenge his father Darius' defeat on Greek soil. Xerxes gathered his massive army and, like a flood, began marching from the east to the west toward Greece. By 480 BC, this army was the largest the world had ever seen. Xerxes was set on crushing Greece by both land and sea. His goal wasn't just to conquer the Greek city-states, but to erase their culture, their freedom, and their honor. But my friends, this is where the great heroes who would change the course of history stepped in. This wasn't just a war, it was a fight for the very survival of the Greek people. And one of the brightest moments in this struggle happened at the pass of Thermopylae. Thermopylae, a narrow and treacherous pass, almost as if it had been created by the gods to test warriors. Xerxes' massive army wanted to pass through it and spread across Greece. But waiting for them at Thermopylae was a brave group, the Spartans, led by their king Leonidas. They had only 300 Spartans with them, but soldiers from other Greek city-states joined their small force. Altogether, it was just a few thousand against Xerxes' tens of thousands. But remember, friends, numbers can sometimes be deceiving. The courage and passion for freedom in their hearts were stronger than any sword or shield. The Battle of Thermopylae. This battle became one of the greatest epics of heroism and faith in human history. Leonidas and his men stood like a wall against the Persian army in that narrow pass. Xerxes thought his army would easily march through. But little did he know, for the Greeks, retreating from this battle would have been a greater shame than death itself. The Spartans never surrendered. On the first day, the Persians attacked in waves, only to be repelled each time. On the second day, they attacked again with the same result. King Xerxes was furious. His tens of thousands of soldiers were helpless against this small Greek force. And then the terrible betrayal came. A Greek traitor showed the Persians a secret path around Thermopylae. It was then that Leonidas and his men were surrounded. But my friends, these heroes never gave up. When Leonidas told his men, "Tonight we dine in the halls of Hades," we all knew their fate. They fought to the last breath, standing firm against the Persian army until the end. Leonidas and his 300 Spartans had held off the Persians and bought precious time for the Greek people. They died, but their memory would live on forever.